In today's world, a child's life is increasingly shaped by screens, swipes, and endless streams of algorithmic content. Children have never had more access to ideas, information, entertainment, but are they better off? While technology connects us, it can also drive us apart. It entertains and it distracts, it educates, but can also misinform. Today we ask, has technology transformed childhood or hijacked it? In this episode of Doha Debates, we're joined by a panel of experts, global thinkers, each with their own take on this issue.
Most digital technology today is not given to young people for them to express what they want. It's used on young people to get them to think, feel, and behave in certain ways.
Digital technologies can be a critical gateway to larger freedoms and self-actualization if we invest in the well-being of our digital spaces. So it absolutely is a positive life force for majority of youth.
Digital technology has hijacked childhood. It's made it unrecognizable from the way that it used to be.
Well, the reality is most people's fears about social media fit into a moral panic, and the evidence right now suggests that for the most part, social media has had very little impact on kids' well-being at all.
Their perspectives will be explored and questioned in a majlis-style debate, grounded in understanding and a search for truth. Watching over all of this will be a group of university students and recent graduates. They come from different universities in Qatar Foundation's Education City and beyond, and have been preparing for this debate.
I think we've reached such a point of addiction to social media that even for me, watching a long YouTube video essay feels like I'm cleansing myself.
These platforms design it so you stay on for the longest.
You start looking for validation on social media as a young girl. You go on all of these social media platforms and you behave in a specific way.
I don't really think social media is the cause of that. I think it's actually a death of community and a lack of structure in their lives. The reason why they go to Andrew Tate and they go to this alt-right pipeline is that they don't have anyone there in their actual real lives to be around.
A lot of parents don't understand social media. If you ask my aunt what Instagram means, what I see on Instagram, she will not know.
After our guests finish their debate, the students will reflect and deliberate before returning with their own insights, ready to challenge, agree, or offer entirely new perspectives. I'm Imran Garda, and this is Doha Debates. All right, really looking forward to this. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. I want to start with you, Douglas Rushkoff. What is the ideal childhood, and does it include screens and devices?
I don't know if there's an ideal childhood. Certainly we could talk about what are the conditions for an ideal childhood, and that would just be a community of people who have your best interests at heart. And I can say that the people who are designing and developing social media aren't thinking first about, is this platform benefiting the child? There was a time when the people making social media companies were thinking of them as ways of connecting people to other people, making it easy for people to make websites and link to each other. Eventually, the people who had invested in these platforms wanted more money from them. The billions of dollars the companies were making doing their social function wasn't increasing fast enough, and that's when they had to find ways to really use the platforms to extract more attention, and that was through less healthy means.
Childhood to me is a moment of learning, of being, without thinking about what others do or think. That being taken away, that very precious moment of humanity from children, is very crucial. It shouldn't be easily manipulated or exploited for selfish reasons.
Okay, so we'll sort of get more into the methodology of it all and how it's designed, but I want to ask Payal Arora this critical take on those at the very top in charge of these platforms that all of us are invested in, whether we like it or not. Are they only looking for the bottom line? and do they not have people's best interests at heart?
I think we're looking in the wrong place. Let me just get this out there is that absolutely, I don't think many people out there are big fans of big tech currently, right? So it's very easy to hate them, and they absolutely are driven by profit, which is also not a debatable aspect. But the thing is, at this point, we are disproportionately giving overemphasis on the power of platforms and their intent, and we're looking less on the creative agencies of young people and what they make of these platforms. I'm a media anthropologist, and I've been looking at, how young people use these digital devices and media across from Brazil, India, China, Namibia. And one thing I can tell you confidently is that they actually absolutely love these tools despite the harms and risks.
I want to take the initial point that you made and ask Jean Twenge this idea that it depends on who you ask and depends on the context of whoever these kids are and where they are. So is there a fundamental difference? So for example, your research, is there a fundamental difference between those you study in the United States, North America, even, we say maybe the West, versus others in countries that Payal has mentioned?
When it comes to trends in mental health and the links between, say, depression, anxiety, and time spent on social media, no, there's not really that much of a difference. So in the PISA data set, for example, 15 and 16-year-olds around the world, including in the global south, so say in Latin America and Brazil, Chile, Argentina, we see the exact same trends that we see in the United States of adolescents since about 2012 being much more likely to say that they feel lonely.
So are you rolling the dice with your kids' health if you give them unfettered access to devices?
I think it's very clear that you are, because that's what parents want to know, and that's the essence. What they want to know is it safe for my 10-year-old to spend 5 hours a day on Instagram? And I think it's abundantly clear that that's not safe.
Both sides accuse the other of cherry picking. Christopher Ferguson, is childhood being hijacked?
Yeah, I have a very different view of the data than Jean has, and this, of course, is a source of our debate. So there actually was a study that came out 2 years ago that did look at these cross-country comparisons, and it found actually the countries are all over the place. There is not this consistent pattern in mental disease, for instance. This was based on the global burden of disease study,
which doesn't have actual data. It has estimates.
It has the actual recordings.
Estimates which are wildly off the actual data.
Well, why don't I finish the sentence before we actually get into the back and forth here? So, a lot of countries in Eastern Europe and in Asia and in Africa do not show any evidence of this increase in mental health disorders.
Because you can't even say you're depressed.
I think the stigma is there.
You can also look at suicide data cross-nationally. And so there is not this pattern of cross-national patterns in suicide, that most countries are staying fairly stable. Some countries are going up, some countries are going down. The US is one of the countries where we're seeing an increase in teen suicide. It's important to point out that's not just for teens, however, that the suicide rate for middle-aged adults is going up.
Okay, so then it's making us all sick.
Well, but you would expect to see a different pattern if this was high-tech adopting people should see a different sort of effect from low-tech adopting individuals.
The suicide rate, great place to start. From 2010 to 2019, among middle-aged people in the U.S., it increased 5%. That's it. You know how much it increased for 10 to 14-year-olds? It doubled. That's a big, big, big difference.
Do you accept that there is an emancipatory aspect for a lot of people who are constrained in their real day-to-day lives offline, and they find a liberation online, connecting with a community, getting to be themselves when maybe they're constrained in certain places? Do you accept that?
Well, I think there's a number of issues there. So one is, how many hours a day of use are we talking about here? Are we talking about an hour a day where you go on, you find that community, but then you still have plenty of time for sleep and going outside and exercise and being with friends face to face? That's not as much of the problem. The problem is the excessive use. And when it's 5, 6, 7 hours a day, that's where you see the worst mental health outcomes by far. And the problem is those algorithms, that's what they're pushing for. They're pushing for those extreme levels of use. TikTok, the companies admit to this, is the other fascinating thing. TikTok said that compulsive use is baked in to the platform.
Douglas, it's interesting. You're an early tech pioneer. Is that a part of the story? And by design, has it been created as this sort of attention casino?
Yeah, I mean, I would say yes and no. I mean, the geeks and nerds who connected with each other over the early networks were, I think they were using them in a healthy way. But the problem was that didn't make enough money, right? So then algorithms were added into the system. So instead of just reading the feeds and notes and posts of people you know, the algorithm decides which posts are you going to read from among the people you subscribe to and from other people. The algorithm is there not to necessarily bring you what you're looking for, but to induce a more addictive state. Back before algorithms, I actually wrote books agreeing with Christopher. I wrote a book called that created the term screenagers, and I invented the term digital natives. And what I was arguing was that kids raised on digital platforms are going to speak the language like natives. And to us adults, it looks all scary and strange, but the kids are going to be all right. And I really think they would have been all right if we hadn't decided, oh no, these kids are using these platforms to engage with each other, to get healthy, to exchange ideas, and they're not buying stuff. They're not staying on the platforms. They're leaving and they're playing with each other. We've got to get more use, more addictive use.
Yes, exactly. Algorithmic neutrality is foreign.
And that's when you start having bias.
And it even listens, by the way.
Engineered bias,
I did want to respond to a few of Jean's points, if I may do so. If you look at like CDC data, I mean, if you look at like what actually predicts which teenagers report, this is self-report data, so you have to take it with some grain of salt. In terms of what predicts their suicidal ideation, for instance, the impact, the effect size, as we refer to it, for adverse childhood events. So this is things like parents who are incarcerated, parents who've committed suicide. Those effect sizes explain, in some cases, nearly 25% of the variance in suicidality, whereas social media use explains less than 1%. In most cases.
Okay, less than 1% is ridiculous. I can admit that this is like a little multifaceted and that there are multiple factors, but to say that less than 1% of depression and suicide is because of social media is ridiculous. Like, come on.
We're not asking with this research, among everything, what are all of the possible causes of mental health issues? We're trying to figure out why it increased and how much the risk increases with more social media use. And that's much more clear that when you look at the risk, that those numbers are not small, that there's something that most parents would not run a risk. I mean, if you take the example of, say, 5 hours a day of social media use, or 6 or 7 hours, that's where we see the worst outcomes.
Payal, are you convinced that there is a problem, even though you're qualifying it and you're saying, well, it depends?
So I'm not a relativist. Let me just take a step back with, the ideal type, like the prescriptive scenario that, say, Jean just brought up some time back about how the healthy thing is you should go out, meet with your friends, have some fresh air. So typical parents, like, who wouldn't want that, right?
Innocence,
like, exactly,
freedom,
like
creativity.
Just get off your phones, get off your devices, go out there. So let me get granular here, right? These are very Western-driven constructs because we are so immersed in our conditions and contexts where we believe what is normal in terms of our access to the streets,
getting fresh air,
to be able to, socialize is extraordinarily Western and privileged.
Tell me why.
Here's why. Let's get granular in terms of the context. Take Afghanistan, for instance, right? You're a woman or a girl in Afghanistan where you cannot go to school at all. You can't go in public space with your girlfriends. You can't actually talk to them by the Taliban law. In fact, you can't even stand next to a window because it could be, dishonorous to your family. In relation to that, so these women, their suicide rates have gone up exponentially, since Taliban took over, right? And what are they doing? They're going online. So yes, there's a high correlation. Guess what? They're spending 6 to 8 hours because they're trying to remember what it means to be a human being because they have less rights than a cat, or an animal out there. And I can guarantee you this, they are extraordinarily grateful to be on digital media because why? Refugees are dehumanized.
Dehumanized by who? People on social media. Like literally the radicalization of people in India and Myanmar to target Muslims. Like, come on, man.
My thing is the tone sounds so patronizing to like so many countries. We're like, you're so happy to be here.
Like she doesn't represent everyone, but she does represent good few.
Do you agree that risk is increased with this universe that children enter?
Of course, look, it's like, tell me one thing, have you fallen in love ever?
Jose Mourinho says I prefer not to speak.
Look, anyone who falls in love, right? There's a lot of risk. There's
Right.
high risk of getting hurt. Okay, we have to recognize 90% of young people live in the global south. Majority of them are going to have arranged marriages and they want to experience what it's like to fall in love, to have boyfriends and girlfriends and have intimacy online. And they go in.
So let's
right?
ask Douglas Rushkoff. Are you changing your thesis?
No, there's different kinds of social and emotional repression in different parts of the world. And, you know, the arguments she's making are very much like what I was arguing in the 90s and early 2000s about the possibilities with these media. It's not about are they good or bad or have they hijacked childhood or merely changed childhood. It's really what are we going to do now? How are we going to prioritize the mental and social health of young people who are using these media constantly?
Khalas, it's already here. Social media is here. It's what do we do? I like this.
I can speak in America, or at least in the West. I think it would be great if kids had one day off a week from social media just to recalibrate. Only because I don't trust my child's development to the likes of Elon Musk. I just don't.
How can we trust the agency of kids and ourselves when we know that the algorithm's essentially trying to keep us hooked like this?
Absolutely. Well, the algorithm is trying to figure out what's interesting to us and give us more. I mean, absolutely, they want to keep us engaged. So I'll tell you an example from my own experience. This with Facebook is because I am a psychologist. I at one point started getting a lot of advertisements about maybe you should be in therapy. And I started wondering, what did Facebook know that I didn't know? All I need to do is hit the little button saying, I don't want to see this anymore. But this is where we get into the idea of like media literacy, is we can help kids, understand, or adults, there are plenty of adults that don't use social media well or news media or anything else well. But we can help people, young people, understand what mechanisms are there already to help them guide their own online experience.
The idea of algorithm is, yes, it is supposed to be addictive. It is supposed to bring you the content that you like to watch, right? And this is something that's completely fine because these social media platforms do tell you that, hey, I'm here for the sake of profit. So at the end of the day, you have the ability to choose what content you want to use, what content you want to see.
Like so many of us lack self-control when it comes to these applications, as grown adults who should ideally be able to better navigate these apps, and yet we fall into manipulation tactics that they use. So yeah, in complete transparency, I kind of fear whether, all these aspirations I have for my future children being able to control their usage is even like feasible or practical.
Unlike ads on Facebook, you can't reset the algorithm. That's actually something young people talk about a lot on TikTok, Instagram especially, that you end up in doom spirals, that you're sad one day, you get sad content, and then it just keeps going. And then with Instagram, another thing that happens is, say a teen girl will start looking for stuff on healthy diets and exercise. And especially if she looks at those things a little bit longer, that explore page and so on, keep feeding more and more of that content. And there are sites called pro-anorexia that will teach young girls to do that.
I actually like the fact that she really brought up how women deal with these issues and how what we face, because you had, these other guests. No one really talked about how many issues, body issues, mental health issues, body dysmorphia. No one for 1 second talked about how plastic surgery is so correlated to social media.
So I think the other problem with that argument about, okay, let's talk to kids, let's teach them digital literacy. Sure, let's talk to them. I don't have a problem with that, but it's not enough. It's not enough because of the powerful algorithms that are involved. It's not enough because there's a lot of social pressure to be on these platforms. And it's not enough because they don't have self-control like
Who
an
gets to
adult
decide
does.
what is enough?
That's one of the debates that's certainly happening right now. And I think, first, obviously, we have to start with parents. And yes, talking to kids, but also having some guardrails in place. I mean, we could start really simple with enforcing existing law, which at the moment isn't done. So at least in the US, there's a law that was passed in 1998 at the dawn of the internet that set 13 as the age of internet adulthood. So you can get a social media account at 13 legally. But there are 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds on TikTok and Instagram on a regular basis because that law isn't enforced, because they don't verify age. They just check a box or lie about your birthday and you're on.
How do you enforce it though? Do you start arresting kids for having?
Thank you.
Like,
Easier said than done, it's one of those things.
Even if you ban phones at schools, you will go back. Family still has to put the effort and the responsibility of still banning the phone or putting some sort of regulations on social media.
So you have 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, very underdeveloped frontal lobe. If we're talking about 20 and 21-year-olds, that's a different discussion than talking about 10, 11, 12-year-old children.
Yes. Can I just focus on the language that Jane is using? Like how these kids are being fed, how they're consuming, and how they're just absorbing.
But have you seen
Like,
the
as
way
if
they
it's spoon-fed.
do
talk,
it
right?
though? Yeah, you
Because I
observed one.
actually
Yeah.
there's a different aspect, right? Is that young people are creating content. I was working with Ethiopians and they can't express themselves. Many of them were asylum seekers in Europe, and I met them and they were like, well, basically, their story, their cultures, if you're the Oromo society, you can't, it's illegal to speak about it. So they go on social media and they're like absolutely optimistic.
Where's the optimism? What social media
None of
are
this
you
is related
using?
to kids. Like she's talking about like young adults and adults.
However, our topic here is about childhood. It's not about us. It's about kids who are in their very important developmental stage where they're forming themselves in the society. They're forming their mindsets, and it really matters what they're exposed to.
I mean, I have 2 little brothers, and I'm worried about what they get exposed to on social media. And, as a kid, I can say definitely, like, I was exposed to things on social media that I shouldn't have been from a very young age. And, I don't think that was good for my upbringing or for my development.
But that's not the way most kids are using it. Most kids are passive use.
Absolutely not.
That's an unfair characterization.
This is a
of kids. Yeah.
generational projection.
Absolutely.
You're projecting your anxieties of your generation onto youngsters
Not at all.
because
Absolutely.
this is more of a reflection of your anxieties than the realities on the ground.
I love the beef.
Are you sure on the same generation or
No,
what?
as a 23-year-old, no.
It got really heated when Professor Arora started speaking, which surprised me because we all said when we read her bio and stuff that we would love her. But then the way that she was maybe speaking or portraying herself kind of like made the whole room go wow, because we're all from like global south. But I disagree with a lot of her takes because I think she was only focusing on people who are displaced or marginalized or like very deep situations.
A lot of it's going to depend on who controls the platforms that you're talking about. Now, there are people, and I know many activists, even teenage activists in India, Afghanistan, Palestine, who are willing to make whatever the necessary compromises are in using one of these crappy platforms in order to still get it out, right? And you can see it. The issue comes in when they lose sight of the fact that these are not public forums. These are private platforms owned by companies that sometimes do what their governments say. Now, I understand the fear is that the arguments about the harms of social media can then be used by authoritarian regimes as excuses to clamp down on positive, potentially revolutionary activity by healthy activists. But the situations we're talking about are so very different. The way a 10-year-old is using TikTok in her bedroom in Alabama is very different than the way an activist may be using YouTube in the rainforest of Brazil.
Exactly. Thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you.
One gets pushed out, the other.
I would ask the young people listening to this, is there, just to evaluate for themselves, Do they experience social media that way? Do the young people who are listening to this conversation, do you see it as the place where you are expressing your true nature, where you are standing up to power, where you are expressing the agency of your generation against systems of control? And if that's what you're doing, keep going.
That's a good note on which to button up this part of it, because they're not quite kids, they're young adults. We've got them listening in, and I'm fascinated. I'm curious to chat to them, but also, have them interact with you later on. So, throughout this debate, just to remind you, our panel of students and recent graduates has been carefully listening to your ideas and all of your arguments. Next, I'm going to go next door. I'm going to join them as they reflect and sort of deliberate on what they've just heard. Now, after that discussion, they'll return here with me to share their own perspectives along with questions and challenges.
I thought to myself that I was going to disagree a lot with Professor Twenge, and that's simply because of our difference in approaches. She cares a lot about the kind of the parental aspect of things, how people should raise families to make sure that this doesn't happen. But actually, I realized through the debate that she actually does support kind of regulating social media, having the state come in and, make sure that it's safer for us. And that's actually something that I totally agree with.
I think in hindsight, although so much of what Professor Arora said I critiqued, I appreciated how she saw social media as a lifeline rather than a threat. I appreciated her showing her perspective.
Are you all talking about social media? Okay, tell me what was the fundamental issue there? What was, if you had to choose one thing that we missed, it would be what?
We spent this whole time arguing over data and whether an issue even exists in social media or what the issue is.
Do you think it exists?
Absolutely. I think the fact that we have to spend this entire time arguing about data about whether it causes depression. I mean, we heard one of the members of the panel claim that less than 1% of depression can be attributed to social media, which is just a ridiculous, stubborn claim, right?
Because it was a whole data talk. It was just
the reality is if you actually want to approach the topic, we could have been talking about solutions. Is it about what the parents do? Should the state get involved? Should we have these restrictions?
And let's remember, this conversation is social media in childhood. Kids do not have agency right now. They're very heavily influenced. We cannot say, let's give them a platform and okay, let's see what happens. You need to help them, and you cannot just pretend that they actually have agency and know what they're doing.
So there's an operative word, agency. Do kids have agency or not?
Speaking about agency, when talking in the context of children, especially on social media, is problematic in and of itself, because where does parental discernment come into this, right? What differentiates an adult from a child during their formative years, right? It's the experience first and foremost, it's the cognitive development, right? You think that, and then where does corporate accountability come into all of this? Are we placing children against trillion-dollar companies?
Okay, I want to take a little moment to ask you to raise your hands if you've ever taken a break from social media or deactivated your accounts, whichever it is. Basically, Alicia, so this is interesting. Now, a lot of that data that they debate over has to do with the issues of mental health, especially young women. I want to ask the women on this panel here, do you believe that it's a myth or it's something very, very real, and it is specifically different to male mental health?
I think it's so real because I think every time I look at social media, I'm a grown woman, I'm 26-year-old, but every time I see a lady in Instagram who looks hot, has money, has everything, come on, I want to feel insecure. I'm here battling life, unemployed, sad. Of course, it bothers me. I feel fat, and I feel like they make fun of a lot of things that women go through. Sometimes I'm in TikTok and I see feminist things. I'm like, wow, this is very interesting. And then you open the comments and they're like, oh, horrible, ugly, feminists, they're ruining the world. We will not kill all women. So it really messes with your mental health. And no matter what you try to do, you can be positive. But as a woman, I feel like I have more hate towards me, and I'm more aware of it. Because of social media.
I appreciate you sharing. Okay, who next wants to go?
If I may,
yeah, sure,
I think I've said this a lot before. It's something I'm really interested in. Teenagers, they're super, super interesting. Their brains are super fascinating. It's from my studies and what I've learned is that once everybody has hit the age of 13, your self-esteem drops to an all-time low. It does this because the validation that you crave from your mom and from your dad turns into a validation that you crave from your peers, from people that are like you, and then then adding social media to that, it's like, okay, well, now you can see what everybody likes and what the trends are and what everyone looks like and what everyone does. And then as a woman, it's like craving validation from a person who you see is ahead of you in a way, or better than you, or whatever it may be, right? It's easier to kind of reason and rationalize these things when we're older, because we can think, okay, you know, some of these people's bodies are fake. A lot of people use, you know, editing or whatever. Some people, their money is made from things that we consider immoral or whatever it may be. And so we're able to rationalize these things, but 13-year-olds who are insecure or who, you know, crave validation from other insecure 13-year-olds, you know, it's difficult.
I definitely agree with most of what Nada mentioned, especially since in today's world, the way the beauty standards are set is way different than back then. Like, it got to the point where people use AI to make themselves look better. If it impacts us as grown adults or young adults in like this much, it would impact a child even more.
Okay, Wahid, let's switch to the XY chromosome here. Now, I mean, there's clearly also a problem, but it seems to be different. Tell me how different it is.
So when it comes to aesthetics, it does exist in men. There's the Giga Chad, there's Alpha,
The gym
Beta,
bros.
Sigma, the gym bros, which I was a part of.
Shout out.
Happens.
Were you an influencer or
I was
a
not an
follower?
influencer.
Oh.
So this is interesting, you know,
Yeah.
because when it comes to me and my brother, we were kind of easily influenced. So there was a time when I watched Andrew Tate and I was like, oh my God, this guy makes sense. You know, he gets me. But now that I'm older, I've realized everything he's saying is so basic, isn't like it's targeted towards kids, and this is why it's bad. And these people, they say these things, but they're so fake. There was an influencer, who I'm not gonna say who it was, who mentioned that you should be natural, you should love yourself. No matter how you are, you should say, you know, I'm happy with how I am. But this person now that has achieved fame and money, he's gone through surgery to make himself look much better.
Young men are being increasingly radicalized by social media, right? So, you know, the influence of the manosphere, you also see, you know, the rise of pornography and sexual content on social media has also led to the objectification, the sexualization of women. So, you know, you see, you know, on comments and whatever, you see like a particularly disgusting type of misogyny that kind of comes out in men when they have access to social media.
I don't know, Hussein, in that sense, is there an inevitability to this thing? Like, the more you engage with it, and maybe even the bigger a person is on there, it's like a downward slope towards, I don't know, disaster.
I'm going to take a completely different approach over here. There is a lack of family structure right now. There is a lack of connection between families and their kids. And this is a huge problem because even if you do not have social media, you're going to still have the lack of connection between families and kids. Now, how does social media play into this? If I'm a person that does not spend time with my families, I don't have any sort of relative traits or boundaries that I need to compare as the ones that my parents taught me with the ones that are there on social media, and then choose which is better for me.
Okay, so then, who here disagrees with that? That the fact that it comes down to the family and the sort of the foundation that you have at home, and then you'll sort
But why
things
does
out.
can it be like a binary? Because it doesn't have to be like agree and disagree.
Yeah,
right?
I feel there's a lot of factors in this, not just one thing.
I think that the best governance is actually via what the founders called the laboratories of democracy, in which we have policies tested out on the local level. For example, say schools banning phones, and if schools banning phones, families buying their kids dummy phones, basically the idea that phones are not, you're not calling them on that phone, you're using social media, for example. You're not using social media, but you only use it to call your parents. And then over time, because those policies actually work, we've seen empirical evidence that these policies make the students perform better in school, and they're not as socially asocial as in the status quo. They can be expanded later on, but a top-down banning is not going to work. I don't really think it can work. This is like China, for example.
I'm going to challenge you even more on this because, like, yes, it might work in schools, but still, at the end of the day, you're only paying attention in school. But as soon as you go back, because you're like deprived of this sort of privilege for a while, as soon as you go back, you seek it out more. Like, I honestly do not see any sort of involvement of the state into this because the characteristics of social media makes it very difficult for you to actually ban. Because at the end of the day, even if you put a ban, you always have the I'm 18 plus check, or even if you try, as you said, like, the only way it was working in schools is that when they banned the whole phone, the whole source of social media. So it's not the state, it's more about the family.
Okay, but can I push back on you, Hussein? You are putting a lot of responsibility on parents. I understand they can teach you values, and that's very important, okay? But when you grow up, you also feel pressure from other people, from your friends, from whoever. But also, a lot of parents are not competent. They do not understand social media. Maybe the younger parents might be, but older parents, like my aunt, my grandma, they have no idea what I'm doing.
No,
They can tell me like, hey, don't go around and do this and that. But I could be in Instagram doing God knows what, selling drugs, and they will never know what I'm doing and how I'm doing it.
As a parent, I should not understand social media to
Yeah,
teach my
exactly.
kids how to deal with social media.
Okay, no,
It's
but they
about,
can teach you
as a
values.
parent, I teach you the right values that are there within our culture,
But the
religion.
kids will never follow the
But if you
values all the
never buy your
time.
kids a phone, then why would they use social media? This is what I'm saying. I think parents should not be buying their kids phones. I see no reason why
Well, no,
kids
because
should be
there's
having
always
phones.
a way around.
They
You
will
can use
be
the laptop,
isolated
you
if
can
you
use
don't,
your friend's
like,
phone.
Dummy
like,
phones.
yeah.
You can call your friends your dad. That's it. They exist nowadays.
But I think it's worth unpacking. Riot mentions bad parenting. Well, bad parenting doesn't happen through a vacuum, right? There's structural systems in place that force parents, or they have no choice but to bad parent. If a parent is overworked, or if a parent, handles a few jobs and stuff, they have no choice but to pacify them kids with these devices.
Take one example of somebody using social media in a very particular oppressive context under persecution. Bisan in Gaza using social media.
Hey everyone, this is Bisan from Gaza. I'm still alive in the day 472 of the genocide.
Is anybody here going to say that that's a problem?
No, context does matter. It's definitely very important. And there is a difference when we talk about giving a 5-year-old, in the United States, a middle-class home, like working parents, social media or access to the internet versus, someone like Bisan, who is a journalist on the ground, like going through the horrific genocide of the people of Gaza. Like, there's a difference.
I think that also another problem is the extreme monopoly happening, with companies like Meta, Instagram, Threads trying to control every format there is. And what happens, something we didn't talk about, is also the policy behind it. These companies, they're a lot of times a reflection of US foreign policy. And a lot of times that's problematic, especially with what's happening today. We have outright seen them hiring a person responsible for Israeli affairs and pushing Israeli propaganda and silencing people from the global south through all those algorithmic suppression that we have talked about. And I think this with time is becoming more problematic. This is going beyond profit. This is becoming a way for them to control the narrative with the billions of users they have access to.
There's a whole other part to this and a really exciting conversation to be had with the experts that you guys have referenced and you listened to, and I know it fired you up as well. Are you guys ready to meet the panelists? You want to follow me? Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
I really enjoyed our discussion because I felt like it was very well-rounded, very well-versed, a very comprehensive discussion. There's so many aspects of social media that we touched on, from like family dynamics to tech oligarchs to extractive algorithms.
The only thing that I see is that people have a problem with the systems around social media, not social media. And this is something that I like, my opinions talk even more on it. It's not social media. Like, all of the problems that we had out there, problems that are related to the family, related to the structure, related to how we are as humans materialistic. And I do agree that social media kind of boosted the idea of this materialistic mentality, and we need to own this, have this look. But at the end of the day, it's something that is within the community that if we actually fix, social media won't be able to boost it. So the social media is always a catalyst, if I may say, but at the end of the day, a catalyst will never be able to complete the whole reaction without having the components at the start.
Okay, amazing. Now we've had an amazing discussion up front. And then I went in there and the students were phenomenal, you guys. Looking forward to you guys challenging each other and maybe trying to see where you guys agree as well. Just open it up. Let's go.
I've heard this a lot from your points, Doctor. You focus specifically on suicide, right? Like, the thing is, I think obviously I did not find a study that directly linked it, but I found a lot of studies that directly linked social media use to depression. PBS NewsHour, they had the scholar that was talking about a recently, just finished study that was supported by the NIH, where they tracked over 12,000 teens' usage of social media. And one of the biggest indicators that they found were that a lot of it increased to the likelihood of depression. Depression does not increase social media, but social media use increases the likelihood of depression. 12,000 kids were monitored over a long period of time. So the thing is, I just don't understand why are we directly focusing on like suicide as the direct result of these issues, because the thing is, like depression surely and all of these mental illnesses surely lead to a lot of things, including suicide.
Yeah.
But it already shows that there is a link to danger, right? And we can agree on that,
Well,
right?
I wouldn't agree with you, actually. Yeah. So there actually are a number of studies that look at this issue. Some do find some small effects, some find no effects, and some find even that social media is beneficial for these types of outcomes. So you have to kind of look at the studies in combination with each other. So there's a little bit of statistical inside baseball, but essentially what they found was a near zero correlation. So I don't know where the...
So if I go on PBS NewsHour and I
Yeah.
listen to it and they say that there is a very strong correlation.
Yeah. Well, you had the part of the answer in what you said. It said there were 12,000 participants in that study.
Yes.
It's a statistical anomaly that when you have large samples, almost everything becomes statistically significant. Almost, like literally, I know there's been
So
like
what's the correct sample size?
Well, wait, but how do you define small, first of all? Plus, what study has ever shown that the heaviest social media users are the least depressed? None, zero. And I think the other thing we have to acknowledge that I think is really important.
That's actually not true.
Would
but
really,
no, it's not true. It's not true.
Yes.
Everyone you say there's
Okay,
a
hold
totalizing
on.
thing like zero,
Please
that is
let me
absolutely
finish.
not true.
The U.S. Surgeon General says that there is harm. He reviewed all of it. His staff reviewed all of this literature and says studies like what you're talking about, that is what most of the literature shows.
No, it is not. That is not accurate.
That is what
National
that
Academy of
report
Sciences actually looked
showed.
at the same body of
That's
research.
a whole other discussion.
This is the problem with
Let
this
me
field,
finish
right?
this.
So just a second. So just a second. I want to bring Felicia in.
Yeah,
and
so
you'll
I
have a moment.
understand about how you have data that says that maybe social media is not correlated, but I think sometimes you are glossing over that there's like, as Dr. T said, young women are being impacted, and maybe because you're not a woman or a young woman out there, you might not see that this is actually impactful. And so I wanted to go back to Dr. T. I saw that, I agree with you, restrictions are necessary, mostly for very young children or even young adults. And I wanted to ask, how do you want to put these restrictions? Which age should we allow to, or should we expose them slowly? And if who should restrict? Should it be parents or the state?
So the age question, I think, is really, really crucial. I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that most of the panel, even with our disagreements, would agree that 7- and 8-year-olds should probably not be on social media. So the law right now in the US is 13, and in many other countries. I think you'd be very hard-pressed to find any parent, developmental psychologist, or teacher who would say 13, right at the beginning of puberty, that is the best time to introduce social media. I mean, particularly for girls, but for boys too. It's just not a good time. And those 3 years between 13 and 16, you get a lot of maturity. There are some people who might argue 18 because that's legal adulthood. What other contract can you sign other than with a social media company to give away all of your personal data when you're not a legal adult? Other than that one, it's the only one. As to your question about who should do it, so parents, but you're right. The parental controls are really hard to figure out, and you have to have time and resources to be able to do that. So that's why I and others such as John Haidt have started to say, hey, maybe we need more regulation. Because if your 7th grader, who's 12 years old, can't come home from school and say, but everybody else is on social media at 12, what a relief that would be to parents to not have that social pressure of all of these very young children being on these platforms.
Look, what's really concerning me right now is that after spending 2 decades, and I focus particularly on young girls and women in the global south, particularly in precarious contexts, but that's a majority. So what I'm grappling with is that what happens when we invest in this fear of the social media is that it is going to disproportionately impact girls and women because parents don't want to let their girls be subjected to harms. So what I'm trying to do is, okay, look, I understand the harms that women disproportionately are facing, particularly in the global south. We need to reclaim this because it is a critical public space. The digital
I would contest
space.
this framing, of global north versus global south when we talk about social media. Professor Arora, you've largely been talking about, India and China, but the reality is that's not all the global south either, right? So, we're talking
Ethiopia and a few other countries as well.
I've worked a long term in Brazil. I've also spoken about the UNHCR project. I've worked in Namibia for 4 years.
All across the world,
I have done a lot of research in very different contexts. And so I did bring
so,
that
yeah,
up.
can we agree that
Yes.
she hasn't just spoken
So-
about India and
No,
China?
Professor,
Yeah,
I think the more interesting point here
Well,
is
hold
actually...
on.
Okay.
So,
I'll let
you know,
you finish
back,
the less interesting
back
point.
to the framing. I disagree with the idea that people in the global south largely just, you know, think that social media is a good thing. I think, you know, from
We
my
have
experience...
it's not a personal opinion. We have statistics by BBC over a decade, you know, documenting. So I understand you have a personal opinion, but we have statistics across countries documenting public sentiment towards these, towards digital media, towards the climate crisis, towards,
No,
as I mentioned.
as we've already established, it's clear that experts can't always agree on what the
No,
data
no.
constitutes. So,
Well,
but
yes, but
you know, just
you're not coming up with a counter statistic or interpretation, right?
first off, I think lots of people in this room have already acknowledged that, I mean, every single one of us is from the global south. And lots of us have already acknowledged the fact that actually, no, lots of our families, our parents do think that social media is incredibly harmful. Lots of us think that social media is incredibly harmful, right? I'm from Iraq. Most of my family thinks that social media is incredibly harmful. And I would argue that that's actually the dominant opinion, right? And so, and then the other thing that you're forgetting to mention, I mean, you've been talking about how people, you know, are empowered by social media. And while that's absolutely true, you're also ignoring the fact that, I mean, even in your own home country of India, right, you have social media being used as a tool of political radicalization. So let's think about how people are radicalized on the internet, how Muslim lynchings in India, how, you know, the genocide against Rohingya in Myanmar are all, you know, being exacerbated by social media algorithms that help to radicalize people.
The fact that we are all here itself talking in English, right? We have so many privileges, right? And so this is what keeps me checked, because I work with refugees over, you know, for 2 years in Brazil, Venezuelan refugees that to me have like lost everything. I can't even imagine why would they be excited or hopeful. I'm talking about the precarious majority. And guess what? They are the majority world because of the growing inequalities that have been, you know, that we've been facing, and the gender violence that have been that we've been facing. And there's multiple
The gender violence promoted by social media, to be clear.
It's not promoted. It's promoted by sticky cultures that refuse to get away because it is perpetuated in our mainstream media. Nobody's denying that it has the potential for, you know, tremendous harm, but it also has enabled the Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter, many activist movements that also are using similar algorithms.
Professor, on that, because you talk a lot about how these tech oligarchs are maybe immoral in your eyes, and I would argue maybe the same, right? I don't think these oligarchs are perfectly moral. I think they're working their self-interest, and they, you know, I think as everyone else does. But do you think that the state should go the other direction and kind of target these companies and break them up, and kind of, even if they're not actually monopolies on like on paper, do you think the state should channel those powers anyway to break up those companies and actually take away power from Zuckerberg and Elon Musk?
I don't have a lot of faith, just because maybe I'm an American, I don't have a lot of faith in the ability of government to do regulation anymore. So I'd take a much more almost a homeopathic perspective on it. So how do we as people increase our immune response to this stuff? How do we teach our kids? How do we teach in schools how to recognize disinformation or how not to trust certain things? It's a longer, harder road. But right, rather than from the top down trying to protect kids from stuff, I mean, I'll do that as much as I can, but it's really more a matter of teaching kids, you know, their own kung fu.
Now, as I say, time is our enemy. Now we've explored bold ideas, we've challenged all these assumptions, we've opened space for understanding, a lot of disagreement, but we've had respect and curiosity at the center, and I'm grateful for that. The conversation does not end here, though. Now, it's your turn. What do you think? You can share your thoughts, your questions, your perspectives. We're listening.